What kind of glyphosate should I buy for my farm?
Well, definitely the kind that kills weeds. That's really important. When you're buying glyphosate, you want dead weeds.
Well, you do, but won't just about anything work? I mean, if it's Chinese stuff, if it's American stuff, does it really make that much difference? That's the big question we've had from farmers over the last few years. So we wanted to talk about that just a little bit today.
Well, unfortunately, that glyphosate decision isn't quite as easy as, well, will this kill a weed or will that kill a weed? Because they will kill weeds. There's no doubt about that. The question comes down to, all right, well, what if I have any issue out in my field? What if I have a Roundup resistant weed? What if I have some unfavorable weather so my weeds don't die the way they should? Or what if I have some crop injury later in the season? All those things are covered by certain types of Roundup, like Monsanto's name brand Roundup, for example, and not covered when you're buying a generic. And that's the big debate. Is it worth the money?
Well, okay, so here's the response that I often get from farmers. They say, all right, well, if I only have to spend $2.50 an acre now to buy a generic glyphosate, if I need to respray, whoop-de-doo, it costs me an extra $2.50. I don't care. But on the flip side, you say, well, Monsanto's Roundup is $4 an acre. That's it for WeatherMax, $4 an acre. I mean, it's dirt cheap. So whatever you pick, it's not that big a deal. It just seems like a fun recreational thing for guys to try to find the cheapest glyphosate they possibly can out there. But what we wanted to talk specifically about today is product quality, and then what are the other benefits or the other things that you have to look at when you're buying a glyphosate? How do those add up? How do they dollar up on every acre?
Oh, when you said it's not a real big deal for your farm, I was just about ready to jump all over you there saying, well, hold on here. This is a really big decision. For me, I'm looking at it as, all right, this is going to set up my whole plan for the rest of the year. Here's an example. With Monsanto's name brand Roundup, they're going to have some cost share assistance for volunteer corn control. If I have a need for a second spray of Roundup, they're going to pick up that cost for me. There are just some other side benefits like that I know for sure I'm going to be taking advantage of. So I'm figuring that into the calculator when I'm doing this. All right, so I have to pay $4 for my first shot. If my next shot's free, all of a sudden I only spent $2 for each shot.
Well, it's not exactly your next shot is free. So first of all, on the volunteer corn thing, if you buy Harness on your corn, and then if you buy Select Max for volunteer corn control in your soybeans, you do get $4 an acre back on the volunteer corn assistance. Well, if Roundup only costs $4 an acre and you get $4 an acre back for the volunteer corn thing, I mean, that's an absolute no-brainer. You have to do that. But to your point, once you decide you're going to buy WeatherMax, then you have also now decided for your farm, you're going to buy Harness on your corn and you're going to buy Select Max on your soybeans. Okay, so yeah, you've made some other decisions there. If you buy generic, you can use whatever product you want. It doesn't really make that much difference. But Select Max is a good product for volunteer corn, and Harness is the best thing you can use for a pre-emerge herbicide in the corn crop. So, you know, why not go that way?
Well, by the same token, you've chosen all the premier products, and now you say, all right, I don't want the premier products, I don't want the premier price, I want the low price. So what are my low price alternatives? If I say I'm going to buy a generic glyphosate for the cheapest price I can find it, maybe it's $2.50 an acre. Okay, well, that's where I start. Now, what's my cheapest volunteer corn control I can do, and what are my other options that I could do for a pre-emerge product if I don't want to spend the money on Harness?
Right, but by the time you add all that stuff up, when you, let's say you're 50% corn, 50% soybeans, it's probably going to end up being a wash.
Well, it is if everything works fine. But here's the thing, if stuff doesn't work for you, it's sure nice to have a company that's backing that up. The other thing is, what if I have a disaster in my field? We had some hail this year on our farm. What if we get some hail that wipes things out? I want my trait money back. And if I can't get that back when I'm using a generic, wow, that's big money. We're talking about some Smart Stacks corn on our farm. We're talking about some Roundup and Roundup Ready 2 beans.
Yeah, let's come back to that. You make the decision on Roundup WeatherMax. Well, now you might just as well plant VT3 corn or Smart Stacks corn, or let's turn it around the other way. If you're planting VT3 corn or Smart Stacks corn, now you almost for sure want to buy Roundup WeatherMax, because you'd only have to have a hail event 1 out of like 50 years, and you'd have enough money to offset that $1.50 an acre that you'd pay more for the WeatherMax. So you got to kind of weigh those things out. There's a certain segment of growers that want to take all the risk themselves, and they say, well, I'll save that $1.50. And there's another segment of growers that says, well, you know what, I'm probably going to get that $1.50 back anyway, so I'll just spend the extra money on the WeatherMax. By the way, on average, we've just run statistics for farmers that we work with here over about the last 6 or 7 years, and on average, Roundup WeatherMax customers, honestly, have paid just slightly less net than generic customers. So in other words, Monsanto has actually paid more money out than what that price difference was between generic and Roundup. In the end, I think for most people, it's going to probably be a wash. And the reason why, when we started this whole thing, I said, it's really not that big a decision anyway, because we're only talking about the difference of $1.50 an acre. Okay, if the corn market goes up 1 penny, and it's a bigger deal than my Roundup decision. Yet, how much time do you spend on grain marketing, and how much time do you spend buying Roundup every year?
All right, well, if you don't want to spend much time at it, then buy something that you know. For example, if you're looking at a generic product, maybe you've never seen that name before ever. And your dealer says, hey, I've got some generic glyphosate and it's cheap and it's called, who knows what. Well, I've never heard of who knows what before. I don't know exactly what's in there. Is there some surfactant in there? Is this stuff going to work when it gets hot or cold or dry?
That's a good question, because this is something that I brought up to a particular state, and I'm not going to mention who it was so I don't get anybody in trouble here. But in talking to a certain state in their regulatory department, I just asked them a simple question, because I was hearing a lot of reports last spring that there were all these different generics that weren't up to spec. Well, we tested some, and the specs were really pretty close. Now, we saw a lot of different colors. You could get the same name of glyphosate and it'd be several different colors, but the specs actually came out pretty close, so it wasn't that big a deal. But anyway, what I was asking this person with that particular state, I just said, are you testing these things? Are you guys sampling this stuff? And they said, well, we test originally when we grant them the label, but we don't do follow-up inspections on a regular basis unless we get complaints. Now, to me, that's a little bit scary. So in other words, some generic company could come in and label something and it's fine.
And have good quality product day one, and then after that start cutting some corners.
Yep, they could, and they could probably get by with it until they get some complaints. So, it's probably not that big a deal, but it was a little bit concerning to me. And right after I talked to this state person, I tested any generic that we were potentially looking at for our own farm, because I just wanted to make sure. So I think that's a big deal.
No, that's a big deal. The other thing is, how much of this stuff are you going to lug around? When you're buying generics, for the most part, all you're finding is 4-pound material. And you say, well, wait a minute, 4 pound, that's what we've always had for glyphosate. No, there's a lot of 5-pound product and 6-pound product now. And you don't think that's a real big deal, but let's just say that you were using 100 gallons of 4-pound, that's going to get you over 400 acres. Well, if you used 100 gallons of 5-pound, that'd get you over 500 acres, or 100 gallons of 6-pound product, that'd get you over 600 acres. Well, that might be the difference between having to go back for another shuttle of Roundup from your dealer, or maybe several shuttles if you're a large farmer, or being able to get by with just one. Well, that's a big deal for me, because it's going to save a lot of time at my busiest time of the year when we're trying to run the sprayer.
Yep, what we're trying to say to you is just make sure you know what you're getting. Make sure it's up to spec. Make sure you're actually getting a real good deal. And in a lot of cases, you're ahead to just go buy the name brand stuff, because now they've got the price close enough. Last year, in many cases, the price wasn't very close, but they lost some sales, so Monsanto got their price right down. So it's basically right in line, and by the time you get any of these benefits back, you're probably going to be paying less than what generic costs you anyway. So on our farm, we're going to be using Roundup Weather Max in most cases this coming year, but we would just suggest that you look at the true economics for your own farm before you buy your glyphosate this winter.
And ask yourself the big question, will the glyphosate I'm buying control our weed of the week? We'll show you coming up later in the show.